The mother cried inconsolably as her deceased son was taken to the crematorium room. The weight of loss settled in every corner of her soul, constantly drowning her cheeks, tracing paths of anguish and desolation in her hands. She tightly held one of the drawings her son had made weeks before his departure. It was a treasure, a piece of her little one that she could still hold between her fingers. Every stroke, every color, was a tangible bond with the love they once shared, now relegated to eternity. But despite the unbearable pain consuming her, the mother clung to an inner strength that sustained her, a strength that came from her unwavering faith. Isabel was a woman who always believed in God. 5 years ago, she lost her beloved husband in a tragic accident during a social work project. He was a pastor of a church in the city where they lived, a man of faith and compassion who dedicated his life to serving others. His death left an unfathomable void in Isabel's heart, a wound that seemed never to heal. Before the tragedy, they had both fervently longed to have a child. However, their efforts were quickly thwarted by the cruel reality of infertility. Despite prayers, treatments, and renewed hopes, the dream of becoming parents seemed increasingly distant. The loss of her husband was a devastating blow to Isabel. She found herself in the darkness of affliction, unable to envision a future without him by her side. But amidst her pain, life had a surprise prepared that challenged all expectations. A month after her husband's burial, Isabel realized that something extraordinary was happening inside her. The news left her stunned, unable to comprehend how it was possible. She was pregnant. It was as if a ray of light had pierced the shadows of her mourning, illuminating her path with a renewed presence. The miracle of life growing inside her was a divine gift, a symbol of love and redemption amidst tragedy. Although her husband was no longer physically by her side, Isabel felt his presence in every beat of the little one growing in her womb. It was as if his love continued beyond death, weaving an indissoluble bond that united their souls in eternity. "My love," Isabel whispered tenderly as she caressed her swollen belly, "God sent us this gift, and I know you will watch over him from heaven." Her words were a murmured expression of gratitude and love, a promise that they would never be alone, even in the darkest moments. As her pregnancy progressed, Isabel found solace in her faith, in the certainty that God was guiding every step of her way. Despite the challenge of raising her child without her husband's physical presence, she knew she was not alone. She had God's love and the eternal memory of her beloved husband to guide and strengthen her on her journey. The day of her son's birth was a moment of joy and renewal for Isabel. Holding him in her arms for the first time, she felt profound gratitude for the miracle of life and the unwavering love that had guided her path from the beginning. As her son grew, Isabel dedicated herself to raising him with the same love and devotion she had shared with her husband. Although his absence left a void in their hearts, the love that united them remained alive and vibrant in every smile, every hug, and every shared moment. It carried her through the darkest days and the toughest moments, reminding her that she was never alone on her journey. With every step she took, she felt her husband's presence and God's loving hand guiding and sustaining her on her path to light. And so, amidst pain and loss, Isabel found the strength to move forward, embracing the gift of life with gratitude and hope. In every laugh of her son, in every shared dream, she saw the miracle of love that transcends time and space. A reminder that love never dies. It only transforms into something greater and more beautiful than she ever imagined. When Thiago was only 2 years old, affliction knocked on Isabel's door once again. Trials seemed determined to take away the happiness she had fought so hard to preserve. "Father, the closer I get to you, the more afflictions I have in my life," Isabel murmured in a whisper full of pain and despair. For several weeks, Thiago had been experiencing worrying symptoms, lethargy, and a concerning paleness in his skin. Isabel, with a heavy heart, took her son to the doctor in search of answers. However, what she heard was more devastating than she had ever imagined. The doctor, with sadness in his eyes, informed Isabel that Thiago had leukemia and that the disease had progressed rapidly, complicating several of his vital organs. The doctor's words hung in the air like a dark echo, filling the room with a heavy and overwhelming silence. "I'm sorry, sister," were Dr. Rodriguez's serene words, who was also a devout Christian and knew the story of pain and loss that had marked Isabel's life. Isabel, in the midst of her anguish, looked at Dr. Rodriguez with a mixture of anger and despair. "Why, doctor?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Why do we have to face these trials over and over again?" Dr. Rodriguez, calmly and compassionately, sought to console Isabel in her moment of despair. "Sister, when there are trials in life, it's because God is refining us. He's working on us because He needs us to be strong for a great work," he said with conviction. However, the doctor's words echoed in Isabel's ears like an empty, hollow echo. "But it's not fair," she protested, feeling the weight of injustice crushing her spirit. "I've always done the right things. I've strived to please God. I've dedicated my life to serving Him, and yet I feel it's not fair that all this is happening to me." At that moment, Dr. Rodriguez took a small Bible out of his pocket and opened it in search of comfort and guidance. "Sister, let me share with you a scripture that has brought comfort to many in times of tribulation," he said as he searched for the appropriate verse. With trembling hands, the doctor found the passage he was looking for and began to read aloud. "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when His glory is revealed." The words touched Isabel's heart like a healing balm, bringing comfort and perspective to her pain. Through the scriptures, she understood that trials and tribulations were an integral part of the human experience and that, despite the suffering, there was a greater purpose at play. Dr. Rodriguez continued to share words of encouragement and hope, reminding Isabel that God was with her in the midst of her pain and that He would never forsake her in her time of need. Although the road ahead would be difficult and filled with challenges, Isabel would find the strength and courage needed to move forward, trusting in God's grace and love to carry her through life's storms. With a heart full of faith and renewed hope, Isabel clung to God's promises as she prepared to face the battle that lay ahead of her. With Thiago by her side and God's love as her sustenance, she knew she was not alone in her fight against the disease. Together with her son, they would face the future with courage and determination, trusting that even in the midst of darkness, the light of faith would never cease to shine. "Mommy, what did the doctor say?" Thiago asked, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. Isabel, searching for the right words to explain the situation to her brave son, looked at him with tenderness and replied, "Thiago, my son, what's happening is that we need to be brave, you and I, for what's to come. God has given us another test to show what we're made of. I am like gold and iron." Thiago responded with determination, remembering the lessons of strength his mother taught him. "Exactly," said Isabel, affectionately stroking Thiago's head. "That's called a lumbar puncture, and this exam was important to find out what you had. Now we know what you have, and the doctors will do everything to fight the disease, my son." "Yes, Mom," said Thiago determinedly. "Doctors are inspired by God, aren't they?" "Yes, my son," confirmed Isabel with a smile. "It's comforting. And you and I will cling to life and show God how strong we are," she added, wiping away tears, determined to face the impending battle alongside her brave son. Together, mother and son prepared for the challenge, with courage and unwavering faith, trusting that with God's help and mutual love, they would overcome any obstacle that came their way. At that moment, the doctor stood up and pulled Isabel aside, aware of the gravity of the situation they were facing. "Sister Isabel," he began with a compassionate voice, "Thiago's blood cancer stage is very advanced, so the treatment that will be applied to him will be very strong. Please, Don't despair if Thiago presents symptoms like vomiting, diarrhea, fainting, and pain. The doctor in charge of Thiago's case will tell you what to do. I hope everything goes well, he concluded sincerely, aware of the weight of his words. That afternoon, as Isabel and Thiago left the hospital, the woman was devastated. Fear gripped her heart, as she had not yet overcome the loss of her husband and now faced the possibility of losing her son as well. The days passed with painful slowness until the day of Thiago's first chemotherapy arrived. The boy, despite his weakness, showed an unwavering confidence that everything would be all right. However, before Thiago entered the chemotherapy room, Isabel knelt in silence and closed her eyes tightly. With a trembling voice, she began to pray, "Please, Father, do not forsake my son. He is all I have, my companion in the midst of darkness. Now, he is facing a great challenge in his weakness. Take care of him and allow the medications to help him fight the disease," she fervently pleaded. When she finished her prayer with a sincere Amen, Isabel opened her eyes and looked at Thiago, who watched her with a brave and determined expression. She gently caressed his face, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to escape. "Mom, don't cry. I'll be fine," said Thiago with a calm but firm voice. As he confidently walked into the chemotherapy room, Isabel held her breath as she watched her son disappear through the door, feeling a lump in her throat and a heaviness in her heart. But in the midst of uncertainty and fear, she found solace in her son's strength and confidence. With renewed determination, she promised herself that she would be there for Thiago every step of the way, fighting alongside him with all her being in the battle against the disease. The sofa in the chemotherapy room was surprisingly comfortable, Thiago thought, as he settled among the cushions. There were other children around him, each fighting their own battle against the disease. Thiago, with his brave spirit, decided to break the ice with one of the children sitting beside him. "It's my first chemo," Thiago said with a friendly smile to the child, trying to find some companionship in the midst of adversity. The other child, whose appearance was much more fragile and concerning, introduced himself as Ismael Martinez with a very weak voice. "The doctor told me there's no more hope, but I'm stubborn. I wanted to do the chemo," he added with a brave smile. Thiago observed Ismael with a mixture of admiration and compassion. Despite his desperate situation, the child maintained a positive attitude and a fighting spirit. However, his physical condition was heartbreaking. He could barely move, had his head bandaged, and an oxygen cylinder beside him. Ismael's mother cried silently, aware that hopes for her son were fading rapidly. Suddenly, Ismael began to convulse violently. Nurses rushed to take him for urgent medical attention before he lost consciousness. Ismael uttered a few words to Thiago that left him perplexed. "Thiago, there are two very beautiful people beside you who bring me peace," Ismael said with a smile. Thiago looked around with bewilderment, but there was no one else beside him. He felt a shiver run down his spine as Ismael's words made him pensive. Later, Thiago heard the devastating news that Ismael Martinez had passed away. The impact of the loss hit Thiago hard, who understood that the fight against the disease was an uncertain and ruthless battle for many. Upon returning home, Isabel, Thiago's mother, asked how he was feeling. Thiago, bewildered by what had happened in the chemotherapy room, shared with her Ismael's words about the two people he had mentioned. Thiago's mother gently stroked her son's head. "They were angels, Thiago. They were there to care for and protect you," she explained softly. Although Thiago couldn't see the angels, he felt a sense of peace and comfort knowing that he was not alone in his struggle. With Ismael's reminder in his heart and the certainty that angels watched over him, Thiago prepared to face the challenges that were still to come, with renewed determination and hope for a better tomorrow. Isabel thought that chemotherapy hadn't caused major problems, but 2 days later, the first symptoms began to appear. Upon waking up, Thiago was noticeably warm, and his mother immediately noticed. Soon, he began to vomit repeatedly, expelling the food from the previous day. Additionally, he complained of intense headache, and his discomforts were so intense that the medications given to him seemed to have little effect. Thiago's fever rapidly rose to 41 degrees Celsius, while Isabel struggled to remain calm and care for her sick son, desperate to alleviate his discomfort. She rushed to prepare compresses to place on his forehead. However, when she returned to the room, she suddenly stopped upon witnessing a disconcerting scene. Thiago was sitting on the bed, staring out the window and speaking as if having a lively conversation with someone. A smile illuminated his face, and his words, full of joy, echoed in the room. "How can my son be like this?" Isabel wondered, confused and worried. "He's very ill," Thiago's mother thought as the critical state of his health continued to speak and laugh in front of the window, as if interacting with invisible friends. "Thank you, it's very beautiful where you live," Thiago said enthusiastically, as his mother watched incredulously the scene unfolding before her eyes. "Thiago," said Isabel with a trembling voice, trying to get him to focus on her. "What are you doing?" "Mom, I'm talking to some friends who came to visit me," Thiago replied with contagious joy, unaware of his mother's concern. At that moment, Isabel decided that it was necessary to immediately take Thiago to the doctor. Her mind was full of questions and fears as she hurried to prepare Thiago to leave. What was happening to her son? Was he delirious due to high fever? Was there something else going on? With a heavy heart, Isabel took Thiago to the clinic, silently praying that the doctors could find an explanation and provide the proper treatment for her son. Thiago was admitted to the ICU due to the significant worsening of his health. The doctor informed Isabel that Thiago had developed sepsis, a widespread infection that put his life at risk. The boy was extremely weak, fighting the disease that had invaded his body. Meanwhile, Isabel desperately tried to see Thiago, but the doctor wouldn't allow it. Thiago was in critical condition in the ICU, which deeply worried his mother. "To be honest, Mrs. Isabel," said the doctor seriously, "it's unlikely that Thiago will leave the ICU. The very high fever he had damaged several organs and systems of his body, causing severe complications." Those words left his mother in a state of anguish and despair. Time seemed to stop in the hospital waiting room as Isabel waited for news about her son. Every second was an eternity. Every beat of her heart echoed with the same anxiety that filled the room. She looked at the clock on the wall, wishing the hours would pass faster, but time refused to yield to her requests. Suddenly, the calm murmur of the room was interrupted by a sudden commotion in the hallway. Doctors rushed toward the room where Thiago was, and Isabel's heart skipped a beat. She stood up abruptly, feeling a lump in her throat as fear took hold of her. "What's happening?" Isabel asked with a trembling voice to a passing nurse. What followed was an uncomfortable silence, as the nurse's words got stuck in her throat. Unable to reveal what was happening due to the hospital's strict COVID-19 restrictions, Isabel felt a wave of despair engulf her as she struggled to hold back the tears that threatened to overflow. After what seemed like an eternity, a doctor approached Isabel with a somber expression on his face. "Mrs. Isabel, your son had a cardiac arrest," he announced seriously. "We are transferring him to another room to try to resuscitate him." Isabel's heart felt as if it were being crushed by an invisible force. The doctor's words echoed in her mind like a grim omen. Instinctively, she closed her eyes and silently offered a prayer to the heavens. "Father, I surrender to your will," murmured Isabel with a voice choked with emotion. You gave me a son to protect and care for, but now you take him away. I only ask that this cup pass from me. I surrender him to you and do with him as you wish." Her words hung in the air, laden with despair, a desperate plea full of anguish and resignation. She felt like a leaf at the mercy of the wind, trembling in the face of the cruel uncertainty of fate. An hour later, the doctor returned with a somber expression on his face. Isabel held her breath, fearing the worst, as the doctor uttered the fateful words. A deep pain engulfed her, like a black tide threatening to drown her. "Mrs. Isabel, we tried everything," said the doctor with a compassionate voice. "But I'm sorry to inform you that your son passed away 9 minutes ago." Isabel felt as if the world were crumbling around her. Reality was a sharp blade that cut through her heart, leaving invisible scars that would never heal. Overwhelming, crushing like a heavy slab leaning on her chest and stealing her breath away. She fell to her knees on the floor, tears streaming freely from her eyes as despair enveloped her like a cold mantle. The void left by Thiago's loss was like a black hole in her soul, consuming everything in its path. In that moment of agony and desolation, Isabel clung to the only certainty she had left, the unwavering love she felt for her son. Although his body lay inert in a hospital room, his spirit would live forever in Isabel's heart, a beacon of light in the darkness of her pain. The pain that enveloped her was so overwhelming that she felt as if the world were crumbling around her. In the midst of her suffering, she began to question the faith she had held for so long. How could God allow so much suffering? Had he abandoned her in her darkest hour? With a broken heart and a mind obscured by despair, Isabel left the hospital immersed in a sea of tears and bitterness. She walked aimlessly through the streets wet with rain, renouncing a God to whom she had given all her love and devotion. "You have forgotten me, Lord," she murmured between sobs. "I gave my life to you. I gave my husband, and now you take my son. Why, my God, why?" Her tormented thoughts echoed in her mind as she moved without direction, feeling each step as an unbearable burden on her shoulders. Words of hopelessness and challenge escaped her lips, an expression of pain and dismay that threatened to completely drown her. Unaware, she arrived at a bridge that rose imposingly over a river churned by the storm. The rain fell furiously, matching the torment that consumed her soul. Isabel stopped at the edge of the abyss, contemplating the dark void that stretched out before her. In a moment of pure despair, she was tempted to let the abyss consume her, to surrender to the pain and despair that haunted her mercilessly. But just as she was about to take the final step towards the abyss, a thought abruptly stopped her. What about her son? Would she abandon him in the darkness and coldness of death, without even giving him a proper farewell? The words echoed in her mind like a persistent echo, shaking her from the suicidal stupor. With a regretful impulse, Isabel opened her eyes and stepped back from the edge of the bridge. A ray of hope broke through the dark clouds of her despair, guiding her back to the path she had momentarily forsaken. With renewed determination, Isabel turned back to the hospital, determined to return to her son's side. Although the pain remained immense, she had found a reason to continue, to give her son the love and care he deserved. Even in death, Isabel's heart beat strong as she anxiously waited at the hospital entrance. The news that she couldn't say goodbye to her son engulfed her in profound despair. The security guard beside her tried to calm her with sympathetic gestures, but the pain in Isabel's chest was too intense to find solace. Minutes passed like hours. Every second was torture as she waited for the doctor to come out and let her see Thiago one last time. Tears streamed down her cheeks as fear and uncertainty enveloped her like a dark shadow. Suddenly, the security guard grabbed his radio and began speaking urgently. Eagle, please approach the crematory hall. movements inside. Isabel felt a shiver run through her body as she heard the guard's words. In her mind, the phrase repeated itself, movements inside the crematory. The idea was difficult to comprehend, and a sense of unease seized her. With her heart in her hand, Isabel followed the security guard as they headed for the crematory hall. Anguish and uncertainty enveloped her like a dense fog, and she couldn't help but wonder what was happening inside those walls. When they reached the hall, what they saw left them breathless. The doctor and a group of nurses stood near a stretcher, looking in astonishment at the inside of the crematory oven, which was about to be turned on. But what struck Isabel the most was what she saw moving inside. A weak and staggering figure slowly rose from the small coffin. Isabel held her breath, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. Was it a miracle? Her son Thiago was alive, with his heart beating strongly in his chest. She approached trembling, unable to believe what her eyes were seeing. The doctor turned to her with an expression of disbelief. "Mrs. Isabel, it's a miracle," he murmured with a trembling voice. "Your son Thiago has come back to life." Tears welled up in Isabel's eyes as she looked at her son, still weak but miraculously alive. Relief and gratitude filled her heart, flooding her with a sense of awe and wonder. In that moment, any doubt about the existence of God vanished from her mind, replaced by a certainty of his love and mercy. As she hugged Thiago tightly, Isabel knew that that miracle would change her life forever. And although difficult days were still to come, now she had the strength and faith to face any challenge the future might bring. Because in that moment of darkness, she had found a glimmer of hope that would never fade. Thiago's miraculous recovery astonished and amazed everyone at the hospital. After receiving immediate medical care and briefly returning to the ICU, Thiago quickly improved. His progress was astounding. Isabel hugged him with tears of joy and gratitude, feeling as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Mom, I saw the angels," Thiago said with a radiant smile as he embraced his mother. His words resonated in Isabel's heart, filling her with deep emotion and renewed faith. But the surprises didn't end there. Soon Thiago's oncologist arrived with a concerned expression and began asking several questions to the boy about his condition. "How are you feeling, champ?" the doctor asked attentively. "I'm feeling very well, doctor," Thiago replied enthusiastically. "I've been very sleepy, but I'm doing very well." The doctor seemed relieved to hear Thiago's response. But then he called Isabel out of the room to speak privately. "Isabel, I've been reviewing Thiago's medical record," the doctor began seriously. "He had a very advanced and aggressive cancer, but the latest tests we did showed that the tumor marker recorded very low tumor activity. This means that the cancer has regressed to stage 1. This is incredible." Isabel listened carefully to the doctor's words, feeling an overwhelming mixture of amazement and gratitude. "I know what happened, doctor," she said firmly. "I have been praying to God a lot, and he heard me." The doctor nodded with understanding, reflecting the same faith and hope in his eyes. "We doctors believe in that too, Mrs. Isabel," he replied with a comforting smile, before leaving her in the room with her son. Isabel felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude as she hugged Thiago tightly. The divine presence was felt in that moment, reminding her that the power of faith and prayer should never be underestimated. With tears of joy in her eyes, Isabel knew in that instant that, with God's help, she and Thiago would overcome any challenge the future might bring. Thiago's life took an unexpected turn after his miraculous recovery. With a gentler chemotherapy treatment, he was able to control the cancer in its early stage, almost completely eliminating the disease from his body. Now, the boy could enjoy a normal life, filling each day with joy and gratitude for being alive. Isabel, in turn, became a fierce preacher, sharing her testimony of the miracles that had happened in her home. In her meetings, she always spoke with compassion and conviction, reminding everyone present of the 3 miracles she had witnessed. First, God gave my son back to life, Isabel declared from the pulpit. Second, he freed him from the disease that afflicted him. And third, he proved to me that he is real and that he hears our prayers. Her unwavering faith was evident in every word she uttered, and her testimony inspired many to believe in the power of prayer and divine intervention. Thiago's story became a beacon of hope for those facing similar challenges, reminding them that they were not alone and that there was always hope in the midst of darkness. Until the last day of their lives, Isabel's faith never wavered. She continued to preach the love and kindness of God, inviting people not to lose heart in times of trial. Isabel knew that trials and tribulations were part of life's journey, but she also firmly believed that God was always present, guiding and protecting those who trusted in him. And so, the testimony of Isabel and Thiago continued to echo in the hearts of those who heard them, reminding them of the power of divine love and the importance of keeping the flame of faith alive even in the darkest moments. Friends, we have reached the end of this beautiful and moving story. Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever doubted your faith? Share with us in the comments and I will give you a heart. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video with your friends and family. Thank you to everyone who watched until here. See you soon with new stories. A big hug and may God bless you.